Hello everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. Today we're discussing The Boys Season 4, Episode 4. So far this season they have put in a lot of effort to give us more depth into these characters. They're not as innocent as they seem, and in some cases they're just as bad as the soups they're trying to take out. I thought the storyline with Homelander was fascinating and much needed. We always think of him as this indestructible superhero that is incapable of feeling any pain. Now granted, every villain has their origin story and it doesn't excuse his horrific behavior. However, everyone in that room got exactly what they deserved. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I always assumed Homelander was made into a soup, that he was injected with Compound V, but according to that Raggedy Barbara, he was born a soup. I really didn't like her characterization of Homelander because she made it seem that he was tortured because he's inherently bad, like he was born bad. However, what we learn in this episode is that he was made to be an evil monster. I think what makes his upbringing so terrifying is that he was never built to serve humanity or really serve a purpose outside of Vought Industries, which explains why he's not that content being CEO of Vought. He kind of craves real power and he doesn't really know what that looks like. Also find out that this deep need he has for love, this kind of insecurity, was manufactured by the best psychologist in the world. And I think Stan was quite brilliant in that he humanized these soups to make them feel like freaks. And as a result, they have this desire to be loved or at least be admired in some way. I always thought that the contrast between Homelander's physical powers and his sort of mental limitations was always fascinating. Some of the strongest people physically are the most mentally vulnerable. He was never really able to develop in the same way, say, his son is developing because he was tortured. And we were introduced to Homelander as this indestructible being, but the process of making him indestructible was incredibly painful. And this is pain that he harbors in his mind every day. And I think so much of Homelander's frustration is that he doesn't really understand why his love is not being reciprocated. That's why he gets frustrated with the Seven. That's why he gets frustrated with his son. He's like, well, I'm doing everything I can, and yet I keep getting tortured. And I think his memory, he has this uncanny ability to remember everything that's happened to him. But he has memory loss when it comes to the things he's done to other people. Homelander is such a great example of victim and perpetrator, because at one point when he was talking to that raggedy woman, and that woman just seemed evil. And I think what I love about this show is that the humans are just as bad as the soups. It almost doesn't matter if you have superpowers or not. You either have humanity or you don't. But one of the points he brings up with this raggedy woman is how no one stopped it. He was just a child. They knew it was wrong and they did nothing about it. And this is something he was complaining about in the previous episodes, how people were just saying yes to him and following along with him. I think he hoped in a way by punishing these scientists for their sins, it would erase his own, but it didn't. And watching him humiliate these scientists, torture these scientists, I mean, again, these people definitely deserved it. And one thing that struck out at me is nothing about his upbringing. He was never made to feel normal. And I thought one of the best moments was when he was describing his squirt story, when he was basically caught in his room, self-pleasuring, and how even then, this moment of pleasure, he was made to feel like a freak. And I think that's why he's trying so hard to get rid of his humanity, because he doesn't really know how to control it. Vought instilled in him this deep need to be desired, this deep need to be loved. He hasn't really found a way to get rid of it. And at the end of his time at the lab, I suspect that he felt a lot worse than when he started. The whole time we're watching him, he's trying to enjoy it. He's laughing, but you can tell that he's getting increasingly more angry. The whole thing just makes him feel worse than he imagined. He's not really getting the feeling that he's yearning for so desperately. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he doesn't know who he is outside of Homelander. Like, even in the lab, you can see that he was drawn until he was like 16. I think a part of that frustration is, in order for him to stop feeling the way that he does have to get rid of Homelander. He does have to form an identity by himself, and he just doesn't really know how to do that. Watching his face at the end of that massacre, you know, you could tell that he's definitely going to go back and inflict more violence. I think in a way it's made him even more desperate for power and more desperate for love. And I thought it was really telling that he let that raggedy little woman survive, because there is still a part of him that's not able to let go. In terms of the boys, like, this was a disastrous episode for them. They didn't really start the season off very well, and it seems like things are getting increasingly worse. Sister Sage continues to be one of the most fascinating additions of the 7, but I am seeing cracks in her armor, and I think she gravely underestimates public opinion and controlling public opinion. Like, you never really know how people are going to react and why. More importantly, people change their minds all the time. Also find out that she's been lobotomizing herself to take a break from being the smartest person in the world. And some of my favorite scenes this season has been with the Deep. And he's completely useless. And like A-Train, he's kind of going through this soul searching. He doesn't know who he wants to be. We're seeing that he's starting to get a lot of confidence. And I'm sure lobotomizing the smartest person on the planet is an ego boost. In terms of other members of the 7, A-Train continues his own soul-searching mission. And what I find interesting about A-Train is that he started off the series terrible. Like, he was annoying, and now he's starting to really find the light. Like, he's starting to really have regrets over the things that he's done. And he's kind of teetering between the 7 and Huey and the boys. A-Train is not the only person desperate to get out of Homelander's grip. We find out Ashley is also kind of teetering as well. Like, that scene when A-Train is looking through Homelander's room, I was a bit nervous because I'm like, doesn't this man have cameras in this room? Like, I was a bit confused as to how he could just casually go in there and start looking around. Like, the vials of milk, the hair, like, it was really just going into Frankenstein's mansion. His decision to steal the Compound V for Huey's dad is probably confirmation that A-Train is gone, right? Like, he no longer wants to be part of this team. And it seems like he's desperate to right a lot of his wrongs, and he's looking for an opportunity to do so. In terms of Huey and his dad, again, this season, it seems like they're spending a lot more time giving us more backstory and building their sort of personal relationships. And Huey's dad, like, injecting him with Compound V, it seems like at the end it did work, but I'm wondering what the ramifications of that are, because I don't think that was a good idea. And from what we know of Compound V, even if it does work for a period of time, it has an expiration date. And this whole thing with his father has been very distracting, because while he's dealing with all of that, Starlight is dealing with Firecracker's raggedy behind. And initially, when Firecracker told us that Starlight was bullying her and was mean to her, I actually did feel bad. I'm like, oh my God, as if Starlight is a bully, because she has such a sweet demeanor about her. But the longer I watch Firecracker, we realize that Starlight was not completely wrong. I mean, besides being a racist, we find out that she's also a pedophile. And I do like the addition of Firecracker, because it really shows how people are able to use their platforms to manipulate the public and essentially avoid accountability. Something about Firecracker, like, her superpower is in social media. Her superpower is in sort of rallying the lost, those looking to be angry about something. And before she started exposing Starlight, Sister Sage, I think, makes a comment like, we need to control the algorithm. We need to pump as much fake news to people most susceptible to it. And this is eerily true. I think what makes the internet terrifying is that you can rile people up and take action and incite violence against those that really have nothing to do with their frustrations in the first place. And that's exactly what Firecracker, like, that's what her character is great at. I think the boys do underestimate her, because, you know, the whole thing seems so silly, and it's like, who would believe all this? But underneath this facade, like, she is saying a lot of serious things. Through Firecracker, we realized that Starlight had an abortion. And that came as a surprise to me. We also find out that during one of her first saves, she accidentally killed someone, very similar to Ryan. And I think what's fascinating about VOD Industries is how it kind of raises these supes and desensitizes them to extreme violence. The difference between Starlight and someone like Firecracker is Starlight didn't really know how to control her powers, similar to Ryan. Like, they didn't really intend harm, even though harm was caused. Whereas people like Firecracker purposely use their platforms to inflict harm, right? They know exactly what they're doing, and they know exactly what the outcome will be. However, F around and find out. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't think Starlight had it in her, but watching her whoop this raggedy woman's behind, I'm pretty sure like her approval ratings went up. Like, I was trying to catch the chat box for the live stream, and I think some people were like, that's kind of awesome. And I think her image as a good girl was very limiting, and I think that's the problem with a lot of these supes, is that they hang on to these images that they think the public will accept or make them more relatable to other humans. But all that's doing is making them seem very robotic and devoid of emotion. Like, if someone exposes your medical history and is talking smack, like, yes, it's a very human reaction to want to kick their butt. In terms of the rest of the boys, like, there was a lot going on in this episode. Kimiko and this whole human trafficking thing. I thought Kimiko's storyline was really like paralleled Homelander's really well, because Kimiko, like Homelander, was also made to be a monster. She's made to be a supervillain, and she's also done a whole lot of horrible things. She kidnapped women, she forced them to fight, but the difference is she doesn't use her background and what happened to her to inflict more violence on people or to justify defending herself. Like, she's able to separate the bad things that's happened to her to the bad things that she's done in her life. I think her storyline is much needed, because one of the things about Homelander is he always acts like he has no control over everything, like people are making him do things, but that's not necessarily the case. In terms of Frenchie's storyline, like, that exploded pretty quickly. I was wondering how long they were going to drag it out with Colin before he finds out about his family, but he found out this episode. And I was wondering if Colin is a supe. Like, I'm not sure. Like, you guys let me know what you think, because that scene with Butcher in the trailer, how on earth is he still alive? Which is really the question when it comes to Butcher every episode. But at first, I thought it was A-Train that came in and saved him. But when we don't really see how he was able to survive and who killed that long-armed freak. With that being said, the episode ends and the boys are in shambles. Homelander is just like, he is out for blood. Huey's dad somehow is revived. And again, I'm not really sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing. Oh, sorry, something I forgot to mention is Black Noir. Like, I did mention him in the previous reviews, but this guy is hilarious. Like, he's not supposed to talk, and I get the sense that he is going to snitch on them hard. Like, he's obviously very uncomfortable with his role, and no one really seems to have the time for him, but he's clearly a ticking time bomb. But I just thought he was a great addition to the cast, because he's trying so hard to fulfill his role, and he's surrounded by serial killers. So you guys let me know what you think, and until next time.